Welcome, friends, to a gathering place for the curious and the brave. Do you ever feel a shiver run down your spine on a perfectly ordinary day? Does the rustle of leaves in the wind sometimes whisper secrets in your ear? We delve into the realm of the unexplained. These are true stories, whispered through generations, passed down from campfire to campfire, each one abrush with the unseen. So settle in, adjust the lights, and prepare to be chilled. Tonight, we share true scary stories. You know when nightmares seem so real that you start to question whether you're actually awake or not? I get those all the time. It's not exactly sleep paralysis. Oh no. I'm thankful it hasn't escalated to that yet, but these are already bad enough. My nightmares are the kind that often incorporate reality into them. The blankets will wind their way around my neck as I thrash, and in my dreams they turn into snakes or even a noose. The sweat becomes a stream of water that tries to drown me. Turning over in bed looked like lurching over and hitting the ground, unable to get up from whatever monster was chasing me. I guess that sums up my nightly torment, up nicely with a pretty bow, doesn't it? Not exactly. There was one time where after I woke up, I didn't get the relief from my nightmare that I usually did. Not even close. Long story short, it was a regular Thursday night. I had come home from work, fed and played with my parrot, and watched some TV. I put my bird back in his cage and got ready for bed. You'd think a parrot would be loud and possibly even contribute to my nightmares, but he's actually very quiet and polite at night. I brushed my teeth, put my pajamas on, and settled into my cool and clean sheets to sleep. Nothing I did that night was any different from my normal routine. For a while, I laid there in the dark, eyes closed, listening to the sound of my own breathing. I don't remember when I drifted off to sleep, or when I started dreaming. I remember I was running on a road to nowhere. The road was wet and slippery as I thrashed my arms wildly, trying to pick up the pace. I'd woken up with bruises on my arms from hitting the bedposts in my dreams before, so this wasn't really new. Suddenly, I tripped and rolled onto the pavement, banging my elbow pretty hard. Another bruise for the morning. I guess I'd heard a tapping sound or something, and my brain somehow interpreted that as a bouncy ball hopping toward me. As far as dreams go, this was certainly a weird one. I remember something shifted in the dreamscape around me, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. It felt like something was squeezing my throat hard. I fought, thrashed, and tried to bite at whatever invisible thing was holding me down, but to no avail. Things were getting warm, and my limbs felt heavy. I was running out of oxygen very, very quickly. All of a sudden, a blood-curdling shriek woke me from the nightmare. The pressure lifted immediately, and I bolted upright in bed. My eyes were swimming, and the screaming continued even after I was awake. It took me a split second to realize it was my parrot yelling at something from his cage. He sounded scared. I wanted to comfort him and tried to say something, but my throat was raw, bruised, and in pain. My voice came out as barely a whisper. My eyes focused on a shape at the foot of my bed. If I could have screamed, I would have. There was a person standing there, hands outstretched. Suddenly, things fell into place. My throat hurting, now I'd suffocated in my dream, my parrot screeching. This person had broken in and was choking me while I was sleeping. Maybe they weren't expecting someone to be home when they robbed the place, or maybe they broke in specifically to attack me. Either way, my parrot had startled them enough to stop what they were doing. This person stood frozen in place, like a deer in the headlights. My parrot began to screech again and go crazy. He even started repeating "get out" over and over, and banged against the bar of his cage for emphasis. I'm not sure where he learned that from, maybe from watching TV together or something, but at that moment I didn't care. I was grateful someone was there to help me when I couldn't do anything. To my surprise, the person took off from my bedroom, yanked open the back door, and ran off into the night. I slammed the door shut behind them and immediately went to check on my parrot. He was unharmed, only ruffled and shaken up. I called the police and the paramedics, who came in record time. The officers searched around my house for any evidence, while the EMTs examined my throat thoroughly. They determined it would be on the safe side to take me to the hospital, while the police said they couldn't find many clues to go off of. They said they'd meet me at the hospital to get my statement once I was feeling better. The only funny and light-hearted thing about that night was that as they were wheeling me out, my parrot piped up from his cage and yelled out, "What you doing?" Everyone jumped. I would have laughed if my throat didn't feel like it was on fire. Long story short, I was extremely bruised, but thankfully the person let go before any more significant damage happened. I was on a round of painkillers and a strict no-talking regimen for a while. I was just glad to be alive at all. I don't know what would have happened to me had my little buddy not come to my defense. He definitely was getting a lot of mango chunks for that one, his absolute favorite. When I went back home, I was nervous about going to sleep. Prickles of dread start in my spine even before the sun goes down on some days, but somehow I'd managed to get through it. I always make sure my parrot is with me, and always double-check my locks now. When I was a kid, my best friend's name was Sam. We lived only a few miles away from each other and would hang out all the time. I remember that many times I would go sleep over at his house, and he would also stay over at mine. Both of our houses were pretty average for the most part, although Sam's was a bit nicer in my opinion. It was also a little bit larger as well. The event I'm going to talk about today took place when we were both 10 years old. Sam and I went to the same school, and one day late in the school year, I went over to his house after classes. The plan was to sleep over, and I was pretty excited about it. I brought my sleeping bag with me, and would be sleeping on the floor of his bedroom. After school, I went over to Sam's house, and we hung out for the rest of the day. I don't really remember much, but I'm pretty sure we just played video games and talked about stuff. We had to go to bed at around 10 or 11 p.m. or so I set up my sleeping bag, and Sam turned out all the lights and climbed into his bed. Every light in his house was off now, and I didn't really like that. In my bedroom at home, I always kept a small lamp on in the corner that gave me at least a little bit of light. Before that, I would have a night light in the corner of my bedroom. I just didn't like things being completely pitch black. I really couldn't see much of anything. I remember that Sam's bedroom door was open, and there was a small light I could see from something. I think maybe it was the thermostat or something. Anyway, I remember trying to fall asleep. Sam always seemed to fall asleep pretty quickly, but I couldn't this night really. I wasn't really that tired, and for some reason I was just lying there awake. I really did try my best to fall asleep, but after a while I just couldn't do so. Sam's bedroom was toward the end of the hallway, where the other bedrooms were. Everybody else in the family had long since gone to sleep, and the house was completely silent. All of a sudden, though, I thought I could make out the sound of somebody walking. I thought maybe it was Sam's parents or something. It was a very quiet noise. Basically, the entire home was carpeted, so it wasn't really easy to hear footsteps. It was so quiet everywhere else, though, that the sound still stood out to me. I looked over and thought I could see someone coming into view. I could only see a small part of the hallway through the open bedroom door, but it seemed like somebody was walking toward the doorway. It was so dark that I couldn't see very well, but I kept watching. I began to make this out much more clearly. A man was walking into the doorway of Sam's room. When I saw this, I realized that even though it was really dark, I could tell immediately it was not Sam's dad. I had no idea who it could be. I closed my eyes and didn't move a muscle. I was pretending to be asleep, even though I wasn't. The man kept standing there for a while. After about a minute, I opened my eyes again, and the man was still standing there in the doorway watching us. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me in particular. I tried not to move my head at all, and opened my eyes very carefully. I closed them again, and pretended to be asleep. I just hoped the man wouldn't enter Sam's room. I heard the guy then sort of walking away down the hallway. I really didn't know who this guy was or why he was here. I also didn't know if he was going to come back or not. As I laid there, I just kept my eyes closed and didn't dare to move at all. During that time, I didn't really hear any more noises. I was really scared to get up and wake Sam up or do anything else. Eventually, after I'm not even sure how long, I fell asleep out of terror. The first thing I knew, I was waking up. It was still dark out. Sam was tapping me on the shoulder, telling me to wake up. After sitting up in my sleeping bag, I noticed that Sam's bedroom door was now closed. He told me there was a man in the house, and the police were on their way. We were supposed to stay in his bedroom and not leave. We waited inside and didn't really hear much else. After a while, the police arrived, and we continued to stay in the bedroom. After a long time, Sam's parents finally came and told us what happened. We found out the man had been located, hiding in the basement. I guess he'd tried opening Sam's parents' bedroom at some point, and that woke both of them up. The man fled, and Sam's parents called the police. They knew the man was at the other end of the house. Sam woke up from the noise and left the bedroom to see what was going on. Then he returned and woke me up. I guess it was the same man I had seen earlier in the night. I'm really glad the man didn't cause any harm, but I never did find out why he entered in the first place, or how he even entered at all. I slept over at Sam's house multiple times after, and luckily nothing like that ever did happen again. I must have been around 7 or 8 years old when my mother enrolled me in the Girl Scouts. We went on an outdoor mission the first week after school ended. I know there were some real Girl Scout camps around, but there weren't any in my area. Some older members were exploring the idea of starting one, but for this trip they simply rented a spot in a regular camping ground and sent us off on our mission. My mother had been a Girl Scout since she was a little girl, and she became a counselor during her college years. She wanted me to join too because she still had friends from those times and said I could use the social skills. I wasn't a huge introvert or anything, but I wasn't the life of the party either. Our counselors must have been in their mid-20s. They were all girls as well. I noticed quite quickly that some of us weren't especially suited for the wilderness, despite what the scouts were supposed to represent. It was one thing to catalog flowers in your friend's mom's big garden, and a whole other to truly try and survive out in the woods. There were around 30 of us little girls, being managed by 3 20-something-year-olds. I understood faster than others that our counselors weren't exactly as dedicated to the task as the people who were normally in charge during the school year. The first leader I'd had as a scout was an older woman, the troop leader who I'll call Miss Evans. She trained the younger ones who became our counselors, but couldn't come with us on that excursion. My peers started to notice the indifference of our counselors as well. One of the other girls was Tana. She was a natural leader even at 8 years old. Some people just kinda have that quality, you know? It wasn't because she was popular or anything. She was very organized, charismatic, and could take charge easily. I'm sure that attitude has suited her well in life wherever she is. That summer trip could have messed us all up, though. It was day 3, and Tana had managed to get on the radar of one of those counselors. I'll call her Paula. As luck would have it, Paula was Miss Evans' granddaughter, a big cliché nepo baby who didn't care about anything at all. What especially made us admire Tana was that she knew exactly how to talk back. I don't know if she did it at home, but she stood up for herself all the time, even when it would have been more convenient to shut up and take it. Paula really hated whenever Tana corrected her, and she did it often. Paula would grimace and speak through her teeth, but we didn't care though. Soon enough, we all began snickering at how angry she would get. It was every time she was wrong or over small inconsequential things like not knowing the real name of a plant or how a compass works in real life. Not exactly something to go furious with rage over, is it? The worst thing happened during a longer hike. Paula was leading the entire 30 girls on her own. The other counselors had stayed back to prepare for another activity they had planned, otherwise known as doing nothing and smoking some weed, but I didn't understand that at the time. Anyway, about an hour into the hike, Paula had gotten us well and fully lost. She had a map in her hands, but she had turned it over many times and couldn't seem to figure it out. She got her phone out, but there wasn't enough data to get Google Maps working. Some of the girls raised their hands with suggestions. "Miss Paula, let's look for some moss on the side of the trees. Let's follow the tracks back. Let's do this and that, etc." Paula lost her nerve, screaming at us to shut up and saying that she knew what she was doing. For some reason, Tana laughed aloud at this. That laugh echoed through the trees, and she said, "You have no idea what you're doing. I can't believe you're even related to Miss Evans. You've gotten us all lost." I could see Paula was about 2 seconds away from beating the hell out of her. The little 8-year-old Tana took the map out of her hands and told us to follow her. We followed, and she brought us back to camp in no time at all, really. We cheered, clapped, and hugged. Paula stomped past us and on to the other counselors. One of them told us to rest and get ready, because we had other stuff to do that day. We had barely changed and chatted a little before Paula called Tana out. I knew what was coming couldn't be good. They made the other girls stay near the campsite, though. I didn't see this myself, but here's what actually happened. Paula and another counselor took Tana to the small meadow in the forest. They tied her to a beach chair that one of them had brought and impaled onto the ground, and they proceeded to beat her until their hands hurt. They left her there for hours. They returned, telling us they had a special task for the group and wouldn't be joining us for some time. At night, we grew concerned. I wasn't really brave myself or a leader at all, but when other girls said they would sneak past the counselors to see if they could find Tana, I went along. We found her quite quickly, actually. That day had been scorching. Her face was red not only from the beatings, but she was sunburned to a crisp and thirsty like nothing else. One of us had brought water, and she gulped it down pretty fast. I had never imagined any adult would be capable of such a horrific act. We untied Tana and took her to the tent. One of us had a phone because her mom was very paranoid about things, so we called her mom up. Soon all the parents were informed. Miss Evans arrived at the campsite a few hours later. She guided us to the parking lot where several parents had volunteered to come get us and carpool around until we all got home. Tana's parents wanted to press charges on Paula and her friend. I'm not sure what exactly happened with that, though. They must have reached a settlement of some sort. I never heard of any escalation, court hearing, or even arrest. Miss Evans had quit Girl Scouts. I felt a bit bad for her, honestly, because she herself was quite awesome. But her granddaughter Paula had been involved, and there was no coming back from that. I also begged my mother to quit, and she allowed it because of what happened. It was just too horrible for words. After that, she let me develop my social skills however I wanted, and rest assured, group activities were never my thing again. I haven't told this story to many other people because it requires the listener to suspend their disbelief. When I've shared my story in the past, I usually get looked at like I suffer from some sort of mental condition or something, but nothing could be further from the truth. I know the ball from the bounce. You have to when you work in finance like me. I'll keep this short and to the point though. Back in 2007, I used to live just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, in a very laid-back and populated suburb. I lived in a townhome. It was about a 30-minute commute to my job or so. I was on a salary, which meant that my hours would vary from week to week. I could come home as early as 12 o'clock in the afternoon or as late as 3 o'clock in the morning. It really depended on what was going on at Wall Street. I remember that this happened on Father's Day. After work that day, I decided to spend some time with my parents and have dinner with them. All went well, and I made it back to my place at around 9 p.m. As soon as you walked into my townhouse, directly in front of you was a staircase that led to a small hallway with the master bedroom being the first door you see. The spare bedroom was right next to that. My usual routine was to grab a snack from the downstairs kitchen before heading upstairs to my room. Since I'd already had dinner that night, though, I decided I would just go upstairs and take a shower, maybe get some sleep as well. The very first thing I noticed was that the light switch at the bottom of the staircase was not working. I figured the light bulb had been shorted out and needed to be replaced. No big deal. However, as soon as I hung my jacket up and began to make my way up the stairs, a low hissing sound stopped me in my tracks. The sound was very disturbing. It sounded like a pissed-off lion. I immediately looked up, and I still get an icy feeling in my stomach whenever I recall what was at the top of the staircase. During nights, the light from a nearby lamppost would come in through the window upstairs and provided just enough light to see the door of the master bedroom from downstairs. The door was open, but that wasn't what made my skin crawl. It appeared that on the ceiling somehow, just above the doorway, was a dark figure. I'm going to tell you what it looked like, knowing full well that you might not believe me. Trust me, I've spent years trying to convince myself that I didn't see what I thought I saw either. But the voice in the back of my mind keeps telling me that I saw it for sure. I can deny it all I want, but I know what I saw upstairs that day. It appeared like a person on all fours was on my ceiling in a quadruped position. From my vantage point, I couldn't make out many details. One thing that made my stomach turn, though, was when the figure moved their head to look at me, and their long locks of hair fell down through the frame. They dangled downward, and the fear became overwhelming. I let out a quite embarrassing yelp and staggered backward. The figure let out a guttural shriek and disappeared from my field of view. I could hear many thudding noises, followed by the sound of my window smashing. I fled from my home and retreated to my car, where I immediately phoned the police. After 10 minutes of looking side to side from the safety of my locked vehicle, a police cruiser pulled into the driveway behind me. 2 officers approached my vehicle and I rolled down my window. I explained the situation to them. The 2 officers entered my townhome with their guns drawn. After about 20 minutes, they re-emerged. They'd searched the entire house, but aside from the shattered window in the hallway, nothing appeared to be out of place at all. Of course, I went through the motions of giving my statement and filed a report as well, but nothing ever came of it. I told the officers I'd seen someone at the top of my staircase in my bedroom doorway, which was true. I left out the part where the person appeared to be crawling on the ceiling, though, like something out of an Exorcist movie. I moved out of that place into a shitty apartment closer to my work, about 2 weeks after that night. To this day, I've failed to come up with any kind of rational explanation for what took place that night. I'm not exactly the sort of person to make things up for attention. I've gone down the rabbit hole of online communities, sharing their experiences with the paranormal, cryptids, aliens, other unknown creatures that allegedly walk the earth. Even though I 100% stand by my story from that night, I can honestly say that I don't think it's any of those things. I think those people have way too much time on their hands. I've come to terms with the fact that I'll never truly know what was on my ceiling that night. I'll just put my story out there and let people take it for what it's worth. Thank you for listening. I went to a shrine in the middle of the night. I want to share my experience. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside along the coast of Hokkaido. Picture a rural landscape with freezing winters. In my hometown, there's a small park with a shrine that's slightly elevated above ground level. The shrine is called Odaka Shrine. In there is a stone monument and a statue. These things have been kind of left out there on their own. I don't think they're even maintained at all. It's a pretty weird area in my town, honestly. Not many people pass by, as it's not that close to the main streets. Because of its location and appearance, it was obviously the subject of many a ghost story, especially at school. Some of the stories I heard when I was younger were quite interesting. Some kids at school said the statue would blink at nighttime. They also said that at midnight, blood-red writing would appear on the stone monument. I wasn't really one for ghost stories myself. Didn't exactly believe in anything paranormal, and I didn't get creeped out all that easily either. I just nodded whenever I heard those stories and smiled. I didn't really care that much. Due to all the rumors about the shrine, though, kids wouldn't even play there during the day. It was a complete waste of the park in the area. A little bit about myself back then. I was a bit of a bad kid when I was younger. I would often sneak out of the house in the middle of the night. I wouldn't do anything really bad. I just liked being outside when it was dark out. Anyway, one night after I snuck out, a thought came to my mind. Hey, maybe I should check out that shrine and see if the rumors are true. In my head, I thought it was a way to have some real bragging rights at school. I mean, wouldn't I look so cool if I strutted in there and told everyone I'd been to the shrine in the middle of the night? These dorks and their ghost stories, I could put that all right to bed and look cool as hell. As you can tell, these were very adolescent thoughts of mine. Only a kid my age would think that going off into the woods in the middle of the night was a really great idea. So off I went. I don't exactly remember what time it was. I know that my parents were both asleep by the time I left, so it must have been pretty late. When I arrived at the park area, I was struck by just how dark it was out there. There were no lights at all. I expected some street lights at the very least, but I had to find my way by moonlight only. It was much darker and therefore much creepier than I had expected. I started to wonder if this was such a good idea after all. I had a lot of courage back then, though, so I pushed on. I had to see if the statue's eyes really did move at night. It was really creepy in that park in the dark. All of my senses seemed heightened, and I was aware of all of the noises in the woods, the rustling of the leaves at my feet, the bugs chirping in the night. It all added to the atmosphere. I went over to the statue and looked into its eyes. I didn't see it blinking or anything like that. I didn't check it out for all that long, to be honest, though. I went over to the park and sat on a swing the kids from my school said swung by itself. Something about a ghost child coming to play at night. It didn't scare me, and it didn't swing either. I was getting pretty disappointed. Next came the stone monument, the one that supposedly revealed blood-stained letters. I walked all around that thing thinking of all the scary stories I'd heard about this shrine, but obviously nothing happened. I thought to myself, I'll show them at school tomorrow. I had the strong urge to use the bathroom though, so I ran to the park's public restroom. I was relieving myself, thinking about how cool I was going to look at school tomorrow, when I began to shiver. The temperature in the bathroom dropped multiple degrees, and it was suddenly really cold. This happened in the middle of summer. It wasn't right for it to get so cold so suddenly, not even at night. It had been sweltering all that week. I even distinctly remember myself in the bathroom saying, "Something's wrong, time to get out of here." I thought I had to get home real quick. I suddenly didn't want to be there anymore. It was like my body was having a reaction to this place. As I was just about to leave, though, I heard this strange slapping sound outside. It almost sounded as if someone had just gotten out of the pool and was walking barefoot on a hard surface, or like someone who just stepped out of the bath walking around on a hardwood floor. I told myself the noise was created by my imagination because I was thinking about all these ghost stories. I told myself to get moving. I took one step toward the exit of the bathroom, and as soon as I did, I heard that noise again. There were more of these strange, wet footstep noises. 2, then 3. All of a sudden, I heard someone rushing up from behind me. I heard a cacophony of footsteps echoing in the bathroom. Like when someone starts sprinting directly at you, I felt something charging at me. I didn't dare to look back. I was so scared that I burst out into a sprint and ran for my life. I'm not ashamed to say there were tears flowing down my eyes as I ran. I was absolutely terrified. Maybe there was no ghost at all, but now there was something chasing me from the bathroom. As I was running for my life, I could tell that whatever or whoever this was chasing me through the woods. When I finally arrived home, I finally couldn't sense that presence anymore. I couldn't get the sound of those slapping footsteps out of my head. I jumped at every tiny noise I heard that night. I slept with the lights on, something I hadn't done in years. I guess the rumors about the shrine might not have been entirely true, but there was something else sinister in that bathroom with me that night. I know I'll never use that bathroom again in that park. I lived in the same house for my entire life, all the way from childhood through high school, and even most of college as well. When I moved out during my last year of school, it was really weird to be in a different place all of a sudden. I'd rented out an extremely small single-bedroom house, all the way on the other side of town. Even though the change of environment was different for me, I still really liked it. On day one, I got a van and moved all my stuff into the new place. I didn't unpack really at all. I just set all the boxes down in the main room and chilled out for the rest of the night. The whole process of finding a place, contacting the owners, signing papers, all of it just left me exhausted, and it felt good to be done with all the hard parts of it. I hooked up the TV and stood it up on a few sturdy boxes, then turned on a show to watch. It was probably around 7 o'clock, so it was still too early for bed. As I sat there and watched with half-open eyes, at some point I began hearing 2 people talking outside. I lowered the volume on the TV and listened in. It sounded like they were right outside my home, but they were whispering and talking extremely quietly. Whatever they were saying, it was too hard to make out. I got up and walked over to one of the windows, pulling the curtain back a little. As soon as I did, a figure moved past it from the outside. I jumped back a bit, getting startled by them being so close. Suddenly, the voices stopped speaking altogether. Now, though, I could hear a set of footsteps quickly going around the house, and then that stopped too. Just like that, it was completely silent once again. I checked a few more windows before getting back to the couch and continuing on with my show. I was certain I was just being paranoid about living alone for the first time, in a brand new environment. I knew the neighbors' houses were really close by, so I assumed it must have something to do with one of them. I sat there for a while with nothing else happening, and eventually laid down. I was starting to get pretty sleepy, dozing off at around 10 o'clock. When I woke up, the house was completely dark, with the only light coming from the TV screen. I looked at my phone and saw it was 2 a.m. I shut down the TV and laid back down, but just as I was about to close my eyes, a soft creak echoed through the floorboards from somewhere across the room. I immediately shifted my eyes toward that sound. In the doorway across the hall, a figure was staring at me. His eyes were wide open, peering at me with half of his body behind the doorframe. My eyes locked onto them, and for the longest few seconds of my life, we were in a stalemate. All of a sudden, they sprinted out of the doorway and down the unlit hallway. Immediately after, another set of footsteps on the other side of the house ran in the same direction. There were a few soft thuds, then silence. The house was still fully dark, making the entire thing that much more terrifying. My heart was beating out of my chest, and I was in an odd state of panic while being frozen in place as well. Once I managed to collect myself, I dialed 911. I told them what happened in between my shaky breaths. While still on the line with the officer, I got up and turned on the light. All throughout the hallway were scuffed shoe prints, going up and down multiple times. When I turned around and looked back at the living room where I had been sleeping, all over the carpet were those same dirty shoe prints, some even within a few feet of where I'd been sleeping. When the cops showed up, they searched around and took a few samples, but they didn't really get any hard evidence. Even more unnerving, though, they still weren't exactly sure how the intruders got inside the house, or outside. I told them about the strange thuds I'd heard from the back of the house, but the windows and door in that area of the home were all still locked. I don't know if they had some way of unlocking and locking them from the outside, but surely that had to be it. While the amount of shoe prints showed they had likely been inside for a long time, going through each room multiple times over, they never actually stole anything. They didn't show any signs of wanting to harm me either. They easily could have while I was sleeping. It all just horrifies me to even think about why they broke in then. Maybe they were looking for someone else. Whatever the case, it's been over 2 years now, and they never came back. I'm a woman, and my name is Jessica. This occurred 2 years ago now. One day, I got a new text on my phone. It said, "Hey, is this Jessica?" I didn't know who it was, but it possibly could have been someone I knew. I responded by saying yes and asked whose number this was. The person said his name was JT, and that was it. Thing is, I didn't know any JTs. I tried to think of anybody I knew with those initials, but I couldn't think of anyone. I texted back, "Do I know you?" JT responded by asking if he could come over. I texted back this JT guy and asked him how he knew me once more. When I said that, he didn't respond. Needless to say, I was very confused by this whole thing. This guy clearly had the right number and knew who I was, but I had no clue who he could possibly be. I worked in the city and lived in a pretty populated area about 10 minutes away from there, but I saw lots of people on a daily basis. I was positive I did not know this guy. It was weird that he seemed to know exactly who I was. After he didn't answer his question as to how he knew me, it was even more suspicious. I blocked him right away. I didn't hear from him for the rest of the night. The next day, I got up and went to work as usual. Like I said, I worked in the city, so I would park my car in the street and walk over to the office. Everything was going normal for the workday. When it got to be an hour or so until I was off, though, I checked my phone. There was another new text on it from a different number. "Why did you block me?" Of course I knew who it was right away. It had to be this mysterious JT. I asked him why he kept texting me. He said he'd been trying to reach me and nothing was going through, so he realized he was blocked. He said he just wanted to talk to me. Then he said this: "I'm waiting for you at your car right now. I know you get off work soon." He was right, but how on earth did he know this? I had no clue. I blocked that number as well. I was hoping it was some sort of crazy joke or something, but I knew there was no way that was likely. When I got off work that day, I left the office and was very careful. What if this guy JT was actually waiting for me at my car? I walked back to my vehicle, which took a few minutes. I got within view of it, but was still a long ways away. I could see there really was a man standing nearby on the sidewalk. I stopped where I was and kept watching him. I was trying to determine whether this was just some random guy or if it was that JT guy. He wasn't walking away and was looking around all over. I didn't recognize him at all. When he looked over in my direction, he made eye contact with me. I looked away. I saw him start walking over to me immediately. He was a long ways away, but I knew I needed to get out of there right now. I started walking down the sidewalk in the opposite direction, as quickly as I could. I made it a few blocks and saw a grocery store. I ran inside, hoping JT hadn't seen me go in. There were a decent amount of people out walking on the sidewalks and stuff, so there was a good chance he hadn't realized I'd gone in there. I walked around the grocery store for a few minutes, looking around because I wasn't really sure what to do. I was hoping not to see JT anywhere. I noticed a police officer who just happened to be in the grocery store. I approached the officer and told him of my situation. He said he could walk to my car with me and see if this JT was still out there. We left the grocery store and I kept my eyes out for JT, but we didn't see him at all. Thankfully, I made it back to my car safely and was then able to drive home. I was glad I'd made it back. However, JT had gotten away. He still knew where I worked and my schedule. I just hoped that he didn't know where I lived now. I lived in an apartment up on the 5th floor during this time. It was a pretty typical one-bedroom place. That night, I felt incredibly unsettled. When about 10 p.m. there was a knock on my door. I knew who it had to be right away. It must be JT. I instantly grabbed my phone and called the police. I didn't even bother to look out the peephole or anything. I was that confident it was him. A few minutes later, he knocked on the door again. I didn't answer. I got another text on my phone from yet another new number. "Open the door. I know you're home." I didn't reply. I just hoped the police would get there soon. 10 minutes went by. I was in my bedroom hiding and listening for any sounds. JT was not knocking anymore. I figured he might have left, but suddenly I heard some voices from the hallway. I realized the police must have arrived. I went to the door and looked out, and sure enough, JT was still there. He was talking to them. They got him to go away, and I also got a restraining order against him. Thankfully, after that night, I haven't seen him since, and I also haven't received any more texts from him. I had just turned 19. I was staying at home from college for the next few months. It was summer break time. My mom lives in the city in the same house I grew up in, but my dad had moved into a small home outside the city. It was backed up to the woods, and I always felt so relaxed while I was there. Just being away from everything felt so freeing. Anyway, over the course of the summer, I got the bright idea to go camping for a night somewhere out in the woods behind my dad's house. I had all the gear already, and I had gone camping before, so it seemed like a harmless, fun night. I didn't even plan on going that far out either, maybe walking for half an hour or so, then finding a good spot to set up. I left about 2 hours until sunset, and walked with no music or anything, just soaking in the environment and sounds of nature. I made it far enough out to start setting up my gear. I pitched my tent and got a fire going, then relaxed as the sun started to set and the woods fell quiet. A couple hours into the night, I went to bed. I had planned to leave in the morning, but when I woke up, I felt like hanging out for a little bit longer. I went for a casual walk and sat by the tent. Surprisingly, the day went by much faster than I knew, and before I knew it, the sun was making its way down once more. I packed up my things and cleaned up, then started walking back home. I walked between the trees, having a conversation with myself in my head to pass the time. As the sun started getting lower and lower, though, I realized it had been quite a while since I'd started out. I stopped and lifted my head, looking all around me. I didn't recognize the area. Obviously there was no path, so I could have been walking in the right direction or wandering around in circles. Something seemed wrong here, though. After an entire minute of looking around, I had honestly no clue which way to go. If I had been going in the right direction, I should have made it home already, or at least to the actual road that my dad's house was on. Racing the setting sun now, I decided to continue in the direction I was going in, hoping that at some point I'd break through and emerge on a road. As I walked, the woods got darker and darker, sending me into somewhat of a nervous breakdown. I was looking all over for anything to tell me where to go. Now the woods were too dark to see anything further than 30 feet. All of a sudden, in the darkness, I could see a light flickering in the distance. I got excited, walking quickly towards it. I made out a dark house, sitting in the middle of a bunch of trees. I thought maybe it was one of my dad's neighbors, or at least it would lead me to a road I could walk along. As I approached the opening in the woods where it was, though, I didn't see anything. There were no roads, no lights from other houses, not even a gravel driveway. The house was old-looking, too, resembling more of a cabin style. There was a light on in the downstairs window, so it definitely wasn't vacant or anything. I walked around to the other side of it, staying in the tree line still. There were no signs of any roads or houses on the other side either. Regrettably, I decided my only option was to ask whoever lived there for some help. I walked up to the front door, listening in for a second before ringing the doorbell. Immediately, I heard footsteps sprinting down some stairs right up to the other side. I knew they were probably looking at me through the peephole, so I called out to them through the door. Hi there, I'm a little bit lost. I was hoping you could tell me which direction the nearest street is." There was a pause, and then they opened the door. 2 men were standing there, both looking to be in their mid-40s and appearing kind of disheveled. One of them took a step forward and looked outside behind me at the tree line, as if peeking for anyone else. For a moment, both of the men were quiet. "Come inside, we'll help you out," one of the men said. He opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Oh, that's okay, I just need you to point me in the right direction. I didn't want to go into some random person's house in the middle of the woods. I also didn't really see the point to it." Both men frowned. Then one of them spoke. He just wanted to talk about why I was out here. I told them I had been camping and gotten lost, but they looked at each other like they thought I was lying. One of them stepped out and stood pretty close to me, as he looked around at the trees more intently. When he stepped out, though, he revealed the room behind him, which only had a small lamp in the middle of the floor, surrounded by a bunch of dust. I took a step away from the man, and both of them turned cold. Their facial expressions and body language became empty, as they stood there in silence. Out of nowhere, one of them tried to tackle me to the ground. Luckily, I reacted quick enough to slip away. The other man tried to grab me as well, and I took off for the trees. I could hear one of the men following behind me. Once I made it into the woods, the man seemed to give up the chase, and soon after, the lights from the house shut off. Hours passed of wandering through the woods in darkness before I finally made it to a road. I discovered I had hiked miles in the wrong direction. I told my dad about the encounter, though, and he took the police to investigate. We were both terrified to hear that the house I'd wandered onto was an old vacation cabin that had been abandoned decades ago. Why the men were there, nobody knows. By the way they were acting, though, it seemed like they were trying not to get caught doing something. If they had succeeded in luring me into their home, I'm not sure if I would have ever been let out. This happened when I was driving home from work late one night. I had just gotten off and was pretty tired. It was almost midnight, or something of the like. I had made it most of the way back in my old beat-up car. It was a green 1997 Chevy Cavalier. It barely ran, honestly. As I was about 75% of the way home, I found myself driving through a very quiet area. There were no other cars on the street at all, and it was mostly just woods on both sides. Out of nowhere, my car, of course, started dying on me. I didn't know what to do. I pulled over to the side of the road and tried to start it again. Nothing happened at all. My next course of action was to take out my phone and call for roadside assistance. Unfortunately, as I tried this, my phone had no signal. Needless to say, this was all very frustrating. I wasn't really sure what to do. I sat there for a few minutes, thinking of my options. I didn't know enough about cars to try and solve the problem myself. I also couldn't seem to get a hold of anybody. I might have to walk on my own to try and find a gas station or something. Thing is, I didn't really know if there were any close by. As I was sitting in my car trying to brainstorm a solution to my problem, I saw some headlights appear on the road behind me. This was the first other car I had seen in quite a long while. I thought about getting out and flagging them down for a second, but I thought better of it. You don't know who could be driving down the street, especially this late at night. I decided to stay put in my car. As the vehicle approached, though, I could see it was slowing down. They pulled over to the side just behind me. I got nervous when I saw this. Sure, it could be a good citizen trying to help me out, but it was also equally likely someone up to no good. With it being so late and dark out, I couldn't help but feel a little bit scared. The car stopped about 50 feet behind me, and the lights shut off. It appeared to be a small kind of pickup truck. I watched in my mirror, and after a few seconds, the driver's door opened up. I saw a man step out, then immediately lean into his car and stick his head in there. It looked like he was grabbing something. When he emerged, I saw he had just put on a clown mask on his head. That's what he was doing. It really gave me the creeps. I wasn't sure why he had done this, but I didn't think it was funny. He started walking over to me. He was moving at a pretty fast pace, too. I had to make a decision fast. I don't remember what was going through my head in that moment. I just know that I opened my driver's door and left my vehicle. I sprinted as fast as I could past my car and along the side of the road. As I did, I didn't look back, but I did hear the clown start to run after me. This made me go even faster. I kept running along the side of the road, but the road went on a lot farther than I imagined. I'm not sure why, but I suddenly took a sharp right and took off into the woods. I just wanted to get away from this clown. I thought it would be harder for him to see me. There I was, sprinting through the woods for a while. I did hear the clown enter behind me. After a couple minutes, I slowed down a little. It was at that point I realized I couldn't hear him anymore. I continued to slow down, now just walking. I then realized he'd likely stopped the chase. I took my phone out to see if it now had a signal, and luckily I did. I then dialed 911 and told them I was being chased through a forest by a clown. My car had broken down on the side of the road. I'm not sure what they thought when they heard that, but it was the entire truth. I gave them my location best as I could, and waited there in the middle of the woods for a while. I didn't hear anything else. At some point, I decided to try and walk back to my car. I went through the woods back the way I came, and walked for several minutes, trying to make my way back to the road. As I was passing by, I noticed a small clearing on the other side. Something caught my eye. The clown was in there, just standing behind a tree. I noticed the whiteness of his mask. It was too late for me to hide. He looked over at me, and I saw him emerge from behind his hiding place. He started to move in my direction. I started running again, trying to get back to the main road. The clown began the chase once more. It was another exhausting chase. I ran even faster this time. It took me a full minute before I reached the road. When I did, I took off running in the direction my car was parked. I did look back this time, and saw the clown emerging from the woods soon after. I kept running. A few seconds later, I saw flashing lights up ahead. The police were already here. I kept running until I saw my car, and slowed down to a jog. I felt much better now. I looked back, but the clown was now gone. He must have fled back into the woods. I met up with the police. The clown guy's truck was still parked right behind my car. The police said they would stay with me until roadside service got there, and they were able to call for me because I had no signal in the area. The clown man did not return. When my road service came and towed my car, I got a ride back home. The clown's truck was still there even then. When I left, he was nowhere to be seen. I'm not sure if he just kept hiding in the woods the whole time or what. Next time I drove by that area, the truck was long gone. I don't know what that clown was planning to do that night, but I'm really glad I ran from him. For a little background, I'm a woman, and I've been going to the gym for several years. I work out at about the same time every day, and this is something that happened just last year. The gym that I go to, I would describe as an average size, I suppose. Typically, I work out in the afternoon after I get done with work. Then I head home afterwards. Every time I'm at the gym, I notice a lot of the same people working out, around the same time as me. I imagine they must have a similar schedule. This gym is never particularly busy, which is one of the best parts of it, really. One day, I arrived at the gym after work like any other day. I went into the locker room and got changed, then went out to warm up on the treadmill. The treadmills at my gym face some of the weight rooms up ahead. There are also a couple of machines that face them. I remember that as I was walking on the treadmill, I noticed a guy sitting down at the bicep curl machine. It just so happened to be facing my direction. A while later, I looked back up and saw the guy was just staring at me, not even working out. I looked away, only to see him staring at me again. After the third time catching him watching me, it was beginning to get really awkward. It was also a guy I'd never seen here before. I tried to keep an eye on him. He didn't even seem to be trying to use the machine, other than to sit down and observe me. I did my best to ignore the man and move on with my workout. I finished on the treadmill and moved away to the weight area. This was past where the man was. For the next 10 minutes or so, everything was fine. But when I turned around, I saw the guy was now sitting on a bench a ways away. He was again staring at me. I thought to myself, wow, great. A gym creep is on to me. I wasn't really sure how to handle it. The man appeared to be in his 40s, average height and weight, light brown, sort of messy hair. Once again, he was not working out at all, just following me around the gym watching me. I really couldn't believe the nerve of this guy to do this so blatantly. I moved to another corner of the gym where I could do my same workout. I told myself to just ignore him. I worked out for 20 or so minutes over there until I was done. When I stopped, I turned around to leave. Once more, the guy was in the area. This time, he was not being as obvious, though. I never noticed him doing any sets or attempting to work out at all. I decided to just leave. I was pretty much done with what I wanted to do anyway. I went into the women's locker room and started to get changed. I had just grabbed my gym bag, and when I came out of the locker room, I didn't immediately notice the guy around. That seemed like a good sign. As I was walking to the front door, though, I saw him sitting in a chair in the lobby area. It appeared he must have been waiting for me. I passed him by, but he didn't make any attempts to get up. This made me feel at least a little bit better. I got back to my car and left to drive home. I just hoped the man would not become a regular at my gym. There was no way that he wasn't following me around and staring at me on purpose. I was definitely going to report him if that continued. I drove home, and it took me about 10 minutes. I made it back to my house. After going inside, I started to go through my normal routine. I would unpack my stuff, then take a shower, maybe make some food. Before I could do that, though, as I was in my living room, I noticed out of my window a car driving by very slowly down the street. Immediately, that was suspicious. The car went a little ways past my house, then looked like it was going to pull over to the side of the road. It went out of my sight, and for a moment I figured it was actually a neighbor's or something. I was just about to walk away from the window. I decided not to for some reason, though. I watched after the car parked and heard the door open. Moments later, I saw a man walking down the side of my street. It was the same man from the gym earlier. I couldn't believe my eyes. He walked up the street and right into my front yard. I moved over to a better place to look out the window, where I was less visible. The man walked right up to my front doorstep and knocked on the door. I kept watching him. After knocking, he kind of moved and went behind a brick pillar on the front step. It was an area where he would have been out of sight if I just opened the door. Obviously, I did not go answer it. Instead, I immediately called the police. Several minutes later, the man knocked again, this time louder than before. After I didn't answer that time, he left. I watched him walk back to his car. Probably less than a minute after he drove away, the police got there. I told them how the man left, and they were able to easily locate him and pull him over. I'm pretty sure they just told him to leave me alone, though. I don't think they gave the guy a ticket or anything. Surely it must have worked because I haven't seen the man ever since. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in the comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that little notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you have your own encounter you'd like to share, leave a comment below. Who knows, it might just find its way into a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the scariest stories are often the ones closest to home.